I guess as I was listening, I was really just, I'm a youth worker, and I was reflecting on how adolescents and youth were sort of invisible in that conversation, and how we tend to, we don't listen to youth, and we don't see them as responsible and able to care for themselves. And so I'm really interested in having youth and anyone living in poverty be a part of these conversations, because it's just as Bill was saying, it's building that bridge that's going to happen. I mean, we can sit around and talk, but we need to be talking to people, everyone who's involved in the community, everyone who's living in poverty, to really to create any kind of successful change.
Thank you for your comments this morning. And I'd like to add to, when we're talking about the cost of poverty as well, that one of the costs of poverty is disease. And in my work, we see the cost of poverty in terms of HIV and hepatitis C, and we see there's definitely a relationship there. Those who are infected with HIV and hepatitis C are also those who are living in poverty. And so one of the things that we have to keep in mind, too, is when we're looking at this economic argument as well, is the cost of people who are sick and their ability to be contribute to a productive society and that sort of thing. And I think the problem that we have is that as long as we continue to not address poverty in a more holistic way, what we have then is we have a whole bunch of different organizations who are functioning on a disease model, and including my organization, and there's a number of organizations all over Canada that are working to address disease in these disease type silos. And if we were addressing poverty and looking at, like as your suggestion is that everybody, we're going to have a minimum income for all people, that we would see then that all of these different organizations that are trying to address disease and individual disease models, that wouldn't be our pressing issue anymore, and that really we need to be looking at how are we addressing poverty, and instead of sort of funding disease model silos. And I think that that's really something that we should be moving towards. I think it's really progressive.
I just wanted to respond and reflect on some of the comments. I had a question that somebody handed to me in writing. Am I talking about a guaranteed annual income, and why wouldn't we talk about that? You know what? I spent 10 years of my life in advertising, and so I want to worry about what it is we're trying to do and not what we're going to call it. Whether it's a basic income floor, whether it's a guaranteed annual income supplement, I actually don't care what the name is. There's probably some politics to the name. A lot of people say nothing in my life is guaranteed. Why should we guarantee something for somebody else? So we have to probably think about that. But the basic premise is, as the last panelist indicated, that nobody would have to worry about poverty in its most acute sense. Everybody would be living at a level where we could say that our poverty level was pretty close to zero in this country. That would be the goal of the exercise. I was very taken by Kate's comment with respect to adolescence. There's a woman who is an assistant Crown attorney in Brockville, in my so-called Senate district of Leeds, Frontenac, and Kingston, and she spends her whole life trying to keep kids out of trouble. So classically, an adolescent gets into trouble. It may or may not be his or her fault, and she's trying to find a way for that person not to go to prison, but to get some kind of diversionary activity to get them back on the tracks to a happy and fulfilling life for themselves. And I asked her point blank, if you were not dealing with the kids who came from impoverished families, what would your client load be? And she said, 0. I don't have any middle-class kids, upper-class kids. They're all from dramatically impoverished families that are dysfunctional because of the impact of poverty on that family. So that's just kind of a fact on the ground, which I think makes Kate's point. Cancer kills how many millions a year? HIV/AIDS kills how many tens of thousands a year? Here's the bad news. Poverty kills more. If we called poverty a disease, it would be the biggest killer in Canada. And the difference is we may not be able to find a cure to cancer. We may find some treatments and some changes that improve people's lives and help them live longer. We actually do have a cure to the worst disease, which is poverty. We don't have to send, laboratory rats to an early death. There was a wonderful test done about 20 years ago on cats. And one set of cats, those of you who studied psychology, were living in a large space and they could wander around and eat when they wanted. And they all came from the same parents, so their genetic makeup was precisely the same. And they all were fed the same high-fat diet. And there were a bunch of cats who lived in cages, fed regular times, let out of their cage, given exercise time, but they didn't decide when they wandered about and did their own thing. Others decided for them. Guess what? Second bunch of cats, they all died 5, 6, or 7 years earlier than the other bunch of cats. Why? Because they had no control over their own lives. And one of the greatest grinding frustrations for our impoverished brothers and sisters is that they have zero control. They are told what to do, they get rules and regulations, and that does connect with the issue of social capital. For me, social capital comes down to one word, and Bill may disagree with that and think I'm being a little simplistic. It comes down to trust. So Donna and I were in Newfoundland a few years ago. We were driving from a theater back to St. John's, reasonably late at night. We had had one glass of wine each at dinner, because that came with the ticket price. And we were probably driving a little bit faster than usual, because we actually wanted to get home to St. John's. And an RCMP car, flashing lights, pulled us over. And when the RCMP officer got out of the car and walked towards our car, here's what I worried about. A, were we driving too fast? B, did we have alcohol on our breath? Might we not pass the breathalyzer? Here's what I didn't worry about. I didn't worry about him raping my wife. I didn't worry about him stealing my car. I didn't worry about him killing me or extorting me for money. A lot of countries in the world, some in our own hemisphere, you can't take that for granted. We do. Why? Because that uniform means something. The fact he has a fair salary and a pension plan and a medical plan for him and his family means something. Trust is present in a society between people who care about each other because people are treated basically fairly. Our society is based on voluntary compliance. Why do you stop at a red light if there's no traffic coming and there's no police car around? Because the traffic lights are basically a good thing. They keep people alive. Well, we have to extend that same premise of trust and legitimacy to the kind of spectrum of incomes and how people are given a chance to participate. And that's, I guess, the case that I'm trying to make. Thank you.